science lab that you'll notice would be put into this facility. It could be used for forensics, it could be used for food science. But we did scale back based on the desire to keep this a little bit more directed towards the career and technical education courses. And so that's how we reached our number.
Do you feel that we have enough classrooms in this space as it's currently designed to meet our needs for the next 20 years, 15 to 20 years?
I think that points a little bit back to Ms. Helliger's question in that the thought process, I think that we're building a facility that will service our district very well and will service about 1,800 people a day, maybe to 2,000. With our projected growth over 15 years, my answer would have to be no. I don't think this will be our only service over 15 years. I think that we will need to reevaluate in some coming time, but we have survived in our existing building since 1971, and I do think that we're designing this with enough flexible space that we can respond to industry changes and we can respond to district changes.
And we still have room to add on to this, correct?
Yes,
so
sir.
We could add on. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Burdine?
Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. I had a question about, and that we've talked about this before, but as far as police training is concerned, is there going to be space for our current police officers to do simulations and trainings in this facility?
Yes, sir, and they were part of the user group discussions. So the way we got to user groups, we're very much looking at, Ms. Helliger, as you've requested, what would long-term planning be? So many of the people sitting in this room were part of that and thinking, how would we use this facility and make sure that we design it appropriately now? So some of the spaces as they come back with some very detailed, or in your book, you'll find in that criminal justice, you'll see simulation rooms, and those are designed with the intent that we could train our own police force. And he's provided the information that they would need. We've had outside agencies help provide information for 911 operator, EMT, distribution and logistics. So we're not just looking at what we have today, we're looking at growth opportunities for long term.
And just real quick, so I noticed on the bottom you had office available. So are the offices going to be for police officers that maybe are in that area, or will it relieve the current location that they're officed at? Is that the idea, or just a place to sit if they need it?
Our current facility, because it sits on the Dulles complex, does not currently have a nurse, and it does not currently have a police officer assigned to that campus permanently.
Oh, okay.
But as we move away from a facility, we recognize that we need to have a nurse full-time, and we also will need to have an office for a police officer that would be there. Obviously, safety and security is a big concern when you start talking about having 5 external entry points, and so all of that has been looked at, but we do feel we would need a full-time police officer at that location.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, thank you very much. Looking forward to this being built. Couple questions. Currently, at the Tech Ed Center, the kids stay for, don't they take English or ELA classes as well?
Yes, sir. So that's their third period,
Right.
unless they're in cosmetology.
So we're going to do the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay. And then, are there any restrictions that might be caused by being across the street from the runway?
The only restriction that we're going to have to really look at is the height, but I think from the distance, right now, we're only looking at a potentially 2-story building, so I don't anticipate any problems. But we have access to the previous FAA study that was completed, and we'll be making sure we double-check all the criteria from the regulatory entities as well as the developer out there in the airport to make sure that we're inside the envelope, the right envelope.
Okay. Because I know when there was a discussion about a high school, there were concerns about, a football stadium, you couldn't put lights up because it was too high and all that, so, okay. And then the other question is, I noticed that one of the notes says it's in the 100-year floodplain. Do we know that, whether or not this land recently flooded? Does anybody know?
Don't know if the land has flooded recently, but I can share with you that this drainage ditch in the back, as well as the detention out here, takes the water away quickly. It being in the 100-year floodplain is just, it's not It is a deal, but it's not a big deal. I know we're all sensitive because of what we just went through, but I don't think we're going to have a problem here with the infrastructure that's already in place from the developer.
Okay. I'm just curious if anybody knows it, whether that was partially underwater recently.
Well,
I didn't check.
I live right there, and I can say that I went out and just was kind of looking around, and there is no water that runs into it and stands on it currently.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, the water
Thank you.
was all pooled at University and Highway 6
Yes.
right there.
It did.
Yeah, it's HEB, right, exactly.
Okay, Mrs. James.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing up about the airport, Mr. Rosenthal, 'cause I was wondering about that and if that provides any obstacles or danger for our students or anything like that. I think that's just something important that we make sure we address and make sure that the community understands how we're looking at that carefully. This again, safety's important. I have a couple questions, kind of picking up on what Mr. Rice was saying about the classrooms. So kind of in your little block view there, are there going to be classrooms downstairs and upstairs, kind of spread out?
Go ahead.
Without trying to step on Meredith's toes, in each of the colored areas, like advanced construction, manufacturing, transportation, they'll have their specialized learning spaces that are appropriate to their need, but inside each of the career communities will be 3 classrooms that service that community. So there'll be 3 for the blue, 3 for the green, 3 for the orange, and 3 for the red, and those will be distributed on the first and second floor. So they'll be centralized so that each community can share them amongst themselves, as well as if someone needs overflow, they have somewhere to go. They're not just confined to their area.
Okay, and I appreciate what Mr. Rice said because I read the same sentence that he did, and I actually didn't take it very well because I kind of had a different interpretation of what we were going for, in the sense of I think we wanted to make very clear our priorities, that our priority was career and technical education, but I don't think that means that it's at the exclusion of any other learning opportunities that might be appropriate to have at the building. So I agree with what Mr. Rice said in terms of are we sure that we are building this building with the future in mind so that we have the right amount of spaces and the appropriate spaces available. I think you said it's kind of covered by the use of some of the larger spaces, flex space, and some of the collaboration spaces. And I think that, that's okay, but I also would, that might be something to just look at again, because I don't want to limit ourselves for making all this investment.
Yes, ma'am.
It's going to be pretty good chunk of time before we're doing this again. So we need to be sure we're providing the best opportunity going forward. So that being said, I appreciated you talking about the flex spaces, appreciated talking about maker spaces, collaboration space, pull-out spaces, all those things that we've talked about in this room in terms of 21st century learning. I noticed in the booklet there was some conversation about libraries. I don't understand, I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that, and what does a library look like at this facility, and how would it be used and by whom?
Yes, ma'am. Because we have 2 English teachers on site who do research papers at the current Tech Ed Center, they were engaged in part of our user group conversation, and we really talked about what does a library mean from the standpoint of 21st century design and a career and technical education facility. I was very encouraged and very pleased as the English teachers shared that one of their best experiences is that they've been able to tailor their research projects to what the students are really interested in their program areas. And so something that came out of that was that they would love to have more resources for the students that are appropriate for those learning communities or those professions, if you will. And so one of the design processes, because it's not a full day facility, is putting a standard library with a librarian there, the right answer. And the English teacher said, no, probably not. Really having resources, both online resources and print resources, in each of their career communities that relates to those careers, so that as the students are moving in and out of their English classroom or their arts and AV class, that they can go find materials that are appropriate for what type of research they would be doing for those classes. Lynette Meyer's group was engaged in all of these conversations as part of the user group, helping us make sure that we look forward to how do we develop 21st century research space when it's not a traditional walk in the library. So furniture that moves, collaboration space. You'll notice in your book that you'll see small work groups, medium work groups, large work groups. Those are some research facilities as well.
Okay, well, that's good, because I don't know that we've had a good conversation about what a 21st century library looks like in Fort Bend ISD, but I'm glad you guys are thinking about that and thinking about what's appropriate in this environment. So I think that's excellent. So again, we're heading in a different direction than paper. So
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to be cognizant of that.
You'll notice that the square footage allowed for that is very small for the library. It's for some information to be there, but also be a portal for that digital connection to what else is available online.
All right, and then I have one other comment, and that has to do with one of your boxes up there is labeled education. And I remember in the original survey that education kind of came pretty high as an area of interest. But I wondered if that was a little bit more of a result of how the survey was done, and by the time kids got down to picking their third and fourth choice, then they were checking education. So I'm a little hesitant. I realize it's, we've shown some interest in that, but flexibility in that education space to convert it to something else might be something we want to think about, because we're modeling a lot of education stuff every single day. So it's hard to, I realize this is a different environment, and I realize, I understand what we're trying to do. I'm just not sure there's the total interest in that the original survey results seem to show. And that, to me, that area stands out as a less, it stands out as different from the others. I'll just say it that way. So anyhow,
Thank you.
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. I have just a couple of comments. I too appreciate you guys adding the 21st century education specifications and all of those elements. So thank you guys for thinking about that. I heard instructional pullout space, I heard maker space, and read about it, and so I appreciate you guys incorporating that. I actually had the same thought as Mr. Rice and Mrs. James about the classroom space, because I know we talked about teaching some of those core classes there for those that couldn't go back to their campus, or if they were just taking the one technical or career and technical course, that they could take their core classes. I just wanted to make sure that we had enough in there to accommodate, there may be a lot of students that want to do that. And so that was a concern that I had as well. I know we discussed keeping the purpose of the facility CTE, but I also want to make sure that we have enough space for students who might need to do other things there. And I'm also thinking about special ed students that may come in for just a really small period of time, and they may need some of that space. So that's just a comment that as you guys are looking at it, I think we all want to make sure that we have enough space there for our kids. And I had the same thought as Mrs. James, because one of my questions was, have we incorporated feedback from our community, our business community? And I noticed that you guys had listed some on the committee that we had, and so that's just a question I wanted you to explain to us and to our community how you've involved the businesses in our community in this design.
So the document that you have in your hands just really relates to the work that's been done since the approval of Stantec. We've had many, many conversations with lots of business and industry partners for the past 2 years. And so I want to reiterate that our advisory committee, and I'll kind of just very briefly review the structure of that. We have an overarching advisory committee at the district level that Dr. Dupree and a lot of us meet with every July. And so they engage and they give us a lot of big picture feedback. And so they're meeting is scheduled for the Tuesday morning after. Hopefully, y'all review this in July so that we can report out back to them. So those conversations are continual. We also meet with different business and industry partners along the way, individually within subgroups. So it might be the automotive technology team, or it might be the culinary group that are providing feedback, helping us understand what industry certifications we need. Those are constant conversations that are going on. We like to refer to those as our industry learning committees. So they're smaller groups, but they're very specific on content that is one area. So it's James Patterson and Betty Baitland and those kind of people are on our big group that meet in July. But the business owners that are in the grunt work of the day that can tell us, and I'll give you a great comment that came out of the June 9th meeting. One of the conversation pieces from our business partner was, okay, when you design these outdoor spaces, you really need to think about how you put the welders in a harness, which is something that we would have never thought about, but we need to teach them to weld upside down in a harness, because that's really what we need out in the field. So those types of conversations are very continual. So the book that you're looking at is just the work that's been done here. We have many, many business partners that feed into that, and we can certainly add as that goes along.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think that's the kind of things that we want to make sure are happening because, back to the flexibility, I think that's another thing that's going to be key is that I know for culinary arts you have to have specific things and for those types of things, but as much as the spaces can be flexible because like Mr. Ray said, is in 15 or 20 years, we don't know
Right.
what's going to be high on the list, so we just need to make sure that we plan for that. So thank you guys. We really appreciate your presentation.
No problem, thank you.
Oh,
Hang
Mr.
on.
Rosenthal.
We need to clarify some things here, because I'm hearing some things that kind of going backwards maybe. So when we discussed the renewed focus on this was supposed to be hands-on. You're going there for one program, right? So whether it's welding or auto or whatever, you're taking an ELA class and then you're leaving. And then the next crew comes in, correct? So I don't see why we need all these other classrooms. I mean, I think they've designed it exactly the way we presented it and voted on it. So I think we're good, right? That's the way we understand things?
Well, let me-
No.
No, not necessarily. Go
Okay.
ahead, Mrs. James.
Right, so I agree with exactly with the concept you just said. But here's a twist. What if we were implementing a project-based learning program? And what if we needed classroom space or flexible space to be used for a different type of teaching that might happen at this CTE center, might be very hands-on, might be very focused on a trade or a craft or something, but required a different setup.
Environment.
And I'm just giving that as an example, because I agree with what you're saying. We don't want to lose the priority of the hands-on technical center skills, and that's what your priority is, and I'm in agreement with that. But I'm also in agreement. But I'm also of the belief that the face of education is changing, and that we might have to have some. We might be wise to have some flexibility in planning when we look at what we're doing in this building.
Sure, I don't have a problem with that. That's not my concern. I'm just trying to think what type of project would it be, unless it was something new that we were adding at a later date, like my
So-
favorite, maritime,
I was just about to go there with you.
and that's fine.
And
You know,
I'll use maritime as a great example, and then I'll tap for education and training just very briefly. So maritime is one of the programs that we know would be growing, but they don't need a lab setting. So as we talked through the ag area, what does that look like? So they have some more traditional classroom spaces that would be appropriate if maritime is the route we take, because really in 2 years when this is actually built, we may come back in 12 months and have to change the program that's going in there because of what the industry needs. So we have looked at designing the space so that it can respond to needs. I do believe that we have built-in space, although I'm all in favor of adding some more space if that's where we're going. But I do believe that we have built this facility such as the education and training. We could have put classrooms that was a 3-year-old classroom and a 4-year-old classroom. And Ginger and at the time Christy Corbett were at the table talking about that. But instead we designed it as a one large space that we would use furniture. So that if education and training doesn't go in there, we remove that furniture and now we have another very large space that can convert to, quite honestly, it could be another robotics floor. Because that may be something that we need long-term, move furniture out. So to answer both of your questions, I think you're both right. And yes, I do think that we have flexibility. Again, a few more classrooms is a few more classrooms if we've got the budget money. And what might that look like? It might be that maybe we're bringing in the evening classes. Maybe we're being able to partner with, we've had HCC and TSTC at the table talking to us. Sometimes they need some traditional space. If we become a testing center for some of these industry certifications, they will need computer labs, testing center. So in that regard, we'll definitely take back all the comments and really make sure that we have enough of that space, maintaining the same focus that the board discussed.
Okay. Mr. Rice?
Good.
Well, I would just like to comment that in the beginning, you presented a facility to us that was approximately 25,000 square feet larger than what we have today. And we, the board, asked you to pare it down, which you did. And right about now, you're probably wanting to ask me, Mr. Rice, do you have a hard time making up your mind? To which I would say, well, yes and no. But if we were to add in the 25,000 square feet back in for the classroom space at the projected construction cost, that's another $6.2 million. I don't know if we have that in the bond program right now. I know all of the costs we've been experiencing are higher than we would like for them to be. So if we do have the money, I would really, my thought is that's to build out the additional 25,000 square feet of space will be cheaper today than it will ever be in the foreseeable future. And I would like to put it back in. On the other hand, if there's not enough money in there, and I don't want to delay this project and have you come back and forth all the time, but if there's not enough money just because our financial resources are constrained, I do recognize that there's plenty of land there for us to add another center at another time. So I'm really not asking you, I don't know, I'm just making a comment. I don't know what the best thing to do. I guess I would have to ask you, Dr. Dupree, if at this time you think, and I know we have a good program, but do we have the money, or are we better off just going with what we have and then adding in the future as the situation warrants?
Well, what I would suggest is that we ask Stantec to see, let's just put pencil to it and really see what it would look like to add it back in, and let's budget it out, and then we can share that information with the board. There's no vote until next month, so we have some time to look at it, and we can provide you that information, and we can judge the cost and benefit.
Does that really slow you down and mess you up? Does it?
No, I mean, I'd rather consider it now than later, so we can definitely look at the cost for the square footage that we have today and then see how much of the delta that was removed we can afford with inside our current budget. And hopefully it'll be all of it, if not a major portion of it, coming back.
All right.
Well, and maybe, I was going to say, maybe there's something in the middle that's either another large space that can be divided up or some other kind of, something in the middle that gives us, I think what we're looking for is flexibility for a future that we can't imagine.
Correct. And I will say that in Katy ISD, when they built their Miller Career Center, they built a 2-story addition, but at the current time, they couldn't finish out the second floor. They built the envelope, and there was shell space, we are currently working with them to build the interior building of the space. So we can try to look at it both cases. One, if you build the entire project, can we afford it with the classes? And if not, can we afford the shell now? And see if that,
Mr. Burdine?
So, I just wanted to give my 2 cents here. Although I understand the extra space, I think it's a great idea. I'm also really liking the thought of using the space that we have in front of us that's designed and do it very, very well. And once we're at that point and we find need, then we can build something else. But when we have schools in our district that have holes in the ground and paint that needs to be put on walls and desks that need to be bought, I just don't see how the $6 million on the extra space right now could be better spent in our bond program. And that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I think what I hear the board saying is that we would like to look at it, if you could get us the information, price it out for us, and maybe give us here's how we would use the space, making sure that our purpose is still very focused on what the board has said we want it to be focused on, which is hands-on, career, and technical. So maybe giving us what would we use that space for, and then that'll just give us an opportunity to look at it and look at what the cost might be and let us know how that jives with our budget. And also, I think at the same time, keeping in mind that what we're mainly saying is we just want to have that flexibility. We just want to be sure that projecting out, looking at not only having the space for our students and what we're going to be doing now, but if we did add maritime or one of those other programs that we see emerge in the next couple of years, maybe even, that we are able to accommodate that. So, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Moving on to 6D, which is the 2015-16 STAR EOC and accountability update.
Yes, ma'am. This will be very brief. As you are aware of most of these issues, I've tried to keep the board apprised of these things, but I did think it would be beneficial to allow the board an opportunity to ask any additional questions. Megan Evans and Thomas Negri are going to do a brief report about accountability and testing.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. There it is. Sorry. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. ETS took over the STAR testing program from Pearson on September 1st of this last year, and their first managed testing cycle was the December end-of-course exam, which was administered exclusively with paper, so there were no online testing. Once we started getting the results from those exams, we've heard from multiple districts of issues that they had experienced, such as reports going to the other districts. We had students reported not being reported at all. We did not experience those types of issues during the December EOC, but what we did experience were 3 students tied to the wrong passing standard. As you may know, the passing standard changed this year, with the December test being the first one where students had to make a higher grade or get more questions correct in order to pass. So we reported the issues to ETS, filled out the requisite paperwork, and unfortunately we are still waiting for results with the right standard. As you can tell, that's very frustrating, especially for the students. Then we turn to the March assessment. The March assessment was the first assessment where ETS was going to administer the online version of the assessments. As has been reported in multiple media, we did experience some of the same issues that were reported across the state, but not at the same level. For example, we did have a few students who were not able to initially log into the system. Once logged into the system, we did have some students not able to complete the test until they made multiple attempts to answer questions. We did have students logged out of the system, and it took multiple attempts to log them back into the system. We had about 6 campuses reporting 14 students with that issue. So, again, frustrating, but nowhere near the experience that other districts were having. Once we received the results, we noticed multiple issues that we knew to look for because we were forewarned with the December issues. We did have several campuses not receive results for students. We had 3 campuses that had results sent to other campuses. We had 2 students who we did not have results at all. We contacted ETS. ETS could not find these students. The end result with these 2 students, unfortunately, was that they were required to take the May retest. We did finally get one of the sets of results. After the May retest, the kid passed the first round. That was frustrating. We also had a couple of students receive duplicate results. The irony being was that the results weren't the same. And they were attributed to different campuses. So we're trying, again, another call to ETS and another call to TEA to try to figure out what was going on and which results were the correct results. Now, we were fortunate in both cases that both sets of results were passing results, but still, which ones were the correct results. We also had some issues with the data file itself. Our SIS department noticed that we had a couple of students with score code O. Score code O is other, and it's typically a student goes home sick, a student gets caught cheating. The test is not to be scored, but yet the data file showed that they had passing test scores, which makes it difficult for campuses to see which students they have to retest when they're looking at the system and they see that the student had a passing score. So in theory, these students could have missed a testing opportunity had not our SIS department discovered that. We did find a workaround with that. It is still an issue, but my department communicated with the campuses how to overcome that particular issue. And then finally, another issue is that unlike Pearson, ETS would load the results into the Texas Student Assessment Portal much later than what Pearson did. Pearson would load the data the same day that we were supposed to receive the results. With ETS, they wouldn't load it for 2 weeks or so until afterwards, and the issue that caused there, again, with retesters, if we had a student moving into the district, we couldn't look up the results, making it difficult to determine whether or not that student needed to take the exam. We had the same issues in May, but not to the same extent. And as the media has reported, as a result of all of these reporting issues, the 3rd round of the grades 5 and 8 STAR exam, math and reading, have been canceled. And we will not receive results for the 3 through 8 STAR exams until July 5th. We were supposed to get those last week. This is to give ETS an additional time to make sure that the data that they give us is up to date. Ironically, we got a new file today with data from several tests ago. All this said, this, of course, now delays or changes how we have to notify parents because we're talking dead of summer when campus staff is off. So working with the Department of Innovation and new name. We're going to be coming in on the 6th. We're going to download the data. We're going to look at the data to make sure that it makes sense. We know that how many answer documents were submitted by each campus, and we're going to see how many results we've got to make sure that we're not having any significant issues. Once that is done, the SIS department will load the data into Skyward and into Eduphoria. And on July 12th, I will send out a blast email to all of the parents in grades 3 through 8, letting them know that the results will be available to be viewed in the Family Access site. We will also be sending home the hard copy results once in August, once the campus staff returns, to be able to stuff all those envelopes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Evans to discuss the accountability issues.
Okay, good evening, Board and Dr. Dupree. So like Thomas mentioned, we are what we call in accountability our big data file. That's our grades 3 through 8 STAR results. We will not get that till July 5th when we are closed. We will be up here running preliminary data reports for you, the Board, for Dr. Dupree, our district and campus leadership. But that also impacts our improvement required campuses. With that, we have received notification that our improvement plan, our TASE or Texas Accountability intervention system plans for Briargate, Ridgemont, McAuliffe, and our former IR for Willow Ridge are not due to the state now until August 1st. We have an internal completion timeline of July 21st, that Thursday. That allows us time to really look at that, synthesize results, make decisions for improvement planning for the following year, and prepare a timely report for the board. So really kind of in a nutshell, these testing issues are really kind of backing our timelines up all the way to we're, anticipating 2016 accountability results. The natural question with a lot of testing issues is, how does this impact accountability? I can't answer that at this point. The only answer I can give you tonight, Board, is that we have heard that there will be no changes at this time to accountability results. And so as soon as I hear something different, if there is something different to share, I will make sure that that information is provided to you as soon as possible. But at this time, looks like the state is really kind of pushing back that timeline to make sure that the testing results are accurate and as accurate as they can be, given all the issues that we've had for the 2015-16 year. And then we will be working, like Thomas mentioned, to verify the results on our end, and we will be waiting with bated breath to see if it impacts accountability. But we are ready. We're excited to kind of close out this year with our 3 IR campuses. They've done a great job. We're excited to share that progress for quarter 4, as well as our end of year progress with the board as soon as we have that information.
Thank you both for giving us that update. I know it's been very frustrating. Ms. Helliger.
Yeah, thank you again, because I'm waiting for my child's.
I am as well. I have an 8th grader that I'm very anxious for that.
Yeah. Okay. Just a quick question. Could you help me? I know we sent out some communication to the parents and the community around the dates. Do we provide them the July 5th date in that communication?
No, we actually just recently learned that, and so that's something we're going to do later this week, is send out a blast to everyone to let them know kind of the new time frame,
Okay.
so they could really anticipate that.
Okay, I think that was really my question, is making sure that we stay in front of the communication to our parents. Also, what is the state saying about this mishap? More like a summarization of what they're going to do moving forward, that kind of thing. I would like to hear that.
The state has, and this kind of goes to the accountability thing, is they're not contesting, or they're not saying that the results themselves are flawed, they're just saying that the reporting is flawed. And we've seen that. My conversations with TEA have been mixed at best. They send us mixed messages. They say that they're working with ETS, but when you talk to ETS, they've not been communicated with some of these issues. So there's some sort of disconnect between the Student Assessment Division at TEA and with ETS.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. James.
Yeah, just one other thing. So thank you for bringing this to us and explaining it all to the best of your ability, and we'll look forward to that reporting and hearing from you in July or early August. How is this affecting our students' promotion to the next grade?
For 5 and 8, TEA has waived the SSI, the Student Success Initiative requirement, so they're not required to pass the mathematics and/or reading assessments. So really, it's now up to the district and what the district guidelines are as far as grade promotion on whether or not a student is retained or promoted.
Okay, and we've done those assessments and tried to figure out what the appropriate path for the individual children is?
That has been communicated out to the principals, and they're looking into that.
Okay, so is in this same time frame, then the parents will be getting, in this July time frame, this is when the parents would first get notice of the possible retention of their child?
There's no retention, state-required retention for grades 3 through 8 for STAR, other than 5 and 8 math and reading. So if a student is not successful on the 3rd grade mathematics exam, that in and of itself is not going to have an impact. But again, the student would have to meet the district requirements for grade promotion.
Okay, so if they're not meeting those requirements, then they've already been notified, or we're waiting until July to notify them?
They should have already been notified.
Thank you.
Before school gets out, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Okay, thank you.
It's a tough follow the exciting CTE plan with
Everybody's very tough.
Thank you. So before we go into closed session, I just want to make sure that we have consensus around discussing the superintendent's evaluation instrument at our July 25th formative evaluation. Is that what, yeah, okay, just want to make sure before we adjourn. We're now going to convene in closed session under the Texas Opens Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Sections 071, 072, 074, 076, and 821. We are now convening in closed session.